So, Bryan, we knocked out the offensive portion. Now it's time to take a dive into the defensive portion. And you had already alluded to this is kind of what's carrying the weight for this overall class and why you have them so highly ranked. So let's start off. You want to go defensive line here? Or do you want to
go front to back? Yep.
All right.
Go front to back.
Sounds good. So
gotta start with the big boys, man.
Yep.
Gotta start with the big boys.
Let's start with the trenches. Start with the trenches, man.
Well, this is the one part of the defensive class that I have lower than the others. And I gave the defensive class a B. It's a top 15-ish caliber class, in my opinion. And let's start with the way that I rank them. My number one guy in the class is Christopher Burgess. He is like the defensive line version of Scrap Richardson in that he just needs a lot of – actually, a better example would probably be Matty Augustine. But he's got more tools. He's a massive kid. Notre Dame listed him at 6'3", 245. He looked a little taller than that to me when I met him this summer. Maybe that's because he has a big afro, so maybe he looks a little taller than he actually is, but he's super long. He's got incredibly long arms. He's got a really big, thick, powerful body. Strong kid, still learning the game. Like, he's got a lot to learn about the game, but he saw a jump as a senior, Trev, and he started to use his hands better. He's got a nice power burst off the edge. He's not going to be playing Viper. He's not like Bubakar. He's got that. He could go play Viper. He's a pure power end right now. That you put at that defensive end position in that rotation next year with Josh Burnham and Bryce Young, and you're like, dude, you're good. You know what I mean? He's that kind of guy. Strong, powerful, pass rush ability improved this year. His production took a jump this year. He had over 100 tackles this season. Had I think 5 or 6 sacks, and they move him all around. To one point in time, like last year, they had him playing a lot inside. This year, they had him playing outside more. But then after a while there, they started putting him at middle linebacker. And he was playing middle linebacker. And I'm thinking, and I played against a lot of D1 dudes, right? I mean, I would not have wanted to line up against Christopher Burgess as a middle linebacker in high school. No. Like, just sorry, hard pass on that action. You know what I mean? But this is a kid that's just got a lot of tools, Trev, and, massive kid, big, strong kid, really nice kid too. Like, that's what I love about him. He's not a guy that's just, he's kind of quiet but when you get him on the football field, man, he's got an edge to him. Like, you meet Chris, I don't know that I've ever seen the kid smile, but he's just got, real quiet, real calm kid. I love the background. For those that don't know the story, Chris is one of those guys that when he first started looking at it and said, look, if you want to get here, you got some work to do in the classroom. So if you want to be here, you need to do A, B, C, and D. And Chris did it. Boom. Just nailed it and got it all done. He's at Notre Dame, wants to be here, beat Ohio State and Michigan out for him. He had over 100 tackles this season. Had offers from Bama, Florida. I mean, because everybody saw the tools, and he started to put those together this season, Trev, and he's just a massive kid. He was a top 150 guy for me when they landed him because he did need a lot of work. He made a lot of improvements, and he was much more productive this year. I regraded him, and he's now a top 100 guy for me with a 4.5-star upside grade. Very close to being a 5-star upside guy, but I couldn't quite pull the trigger on the 5-star. But he's a top 50 caliber guy for me, upside-wise. He's also a kid that I like him at defensive end. That's where I like him right now. But when you look at the frame, Trevor, sometimes I get some like Riley Mills type of vibes from him, body type wise, because he's got real broad shoulders that maybe it just naturally he's going to get up to 280, 285, 290. And all of a sudden you're like, either A, you move him inside permanently, or B, he becomes your 3 technique and third down passing situations. Like that, I'm almost certain of. He'll have some of that. But more of on a permanent basis, maybe. He's got a little bit of that. I would let him grow naturally. I wouldn't force that weight on him, but if he's just, you get to the strength program and the nutrition program, all of a sudden you're like, dude, he's 280. We got to keep weight off him. Don't. Just let him do it naturally. And then next thing you know, he's the next Riley Mills type of guy. But there's a lot of tools with this kid. Trev.
No, his length, I think, is the most eye-popping thing for me. Now, it could have just been because the game that I watched of his, he was just in like white long sleeves, which just like makes everybody.
No.
But man,
I've stood next to the kid during visits and during the Irish invasion, it's real. He's super long. He's super long. Next guy for me is actually Dom Hulac. Now, he was my number 5 defensive lineman, or number 4 defensive lineman when he committed, just ahead of Gordy Sulfsted. He's now my number 2. And what I saw, a really strong, try-hard guy, not a real twitchy guy, not a top-level athlete, smart kid. Saw him this summer at the Irish Invasion. I'm like, huh. Because, like, I saw him the year before the Irish Invasion. And he's playing linebacker, and I just didn't see like great lateral quickness. I didn't see great burst. His film was really good for high school, but I just didn't see that high level athleticism that you want for a guy that's going to play Viper. And so I didn't like the move, I'll be honest with you. And I'll have a comment about the defensive line grade, what could have made it different. But now watching him as a senior, Trev, you're like, okay, this kid is a 4-star player. Dom Hulac had a huge jump for me as a senior. His burst off the edge was outstanding. His ability to move laterally was a lot better, a lot more impressive to me. Really, really just his ability to kind of plant and explode down him. Because like some of the things I didn't love about him as a linebacker don't matter as a Viper. Can you plant, drive, and run this way 50 yard? Doesn't need to do that as a Viper. But that downhill burst off the edge took a jump. And he got a little bit bigger. He's got a lot better length than I thought he had when you see him up in. Now I don't know if he got longer, but like I didn't notice that when I saw him 2 summers ago. You see that I saw that this summer. As I said earlier, he's one of my biggest risers to where he's now a top 150, borderline top 150 kid. I still have him in the top 250, but his grade is closer to being in the 150 than it is to being out at 250. So he saw a big jump for me this offseason, and he's now the number 2 guy. Now you have 2 good ends in this class from the Chicago area. That's huge. You have a Viper and an end. So 2 edge players, excuse me. You have an end and a Viper. And 2 guys that have now, like before I thought Dom was going to be like a rotation. He still may be a rotation guy, but he now showed me starting caliber talent for that Viper position. I mean, you talk about a comparison. He's a longer version of Jordan Botelho. That's what I saw from him on film. Taller, longer version of Jordan Botelho. Very similar skill set, very similar athletic ability from what I saw from Jordan. Now, that's quite a comp because Jordan Botelho's a pretty good player when he wanted to.
Yeah, I was about to say that's a good comp. That's definitely a good comp.
Next guy on the board for me, I'm going to have Gordy Sulfsted's going to be at the bottom as an asterisk because he didn't play his senior year. Next guy on the board for me is Joseph Reiff. He's one of the guys that his grade is a little bit lower than I originally had it. I had him as a 4-star guy that was a top 250 guy that was very close to a top 150 guy. He's now borderline top 250 for me. Like he's close to getting down to 3.5 star. Excellent high school football player. Really, really good high school football player. The issue for me, Trev, is that the frame to me wasn't quite what I hoped it would be. He doesn't quite. I thought he was a guy that was going to end up becoming a 3 technique, and he doesn't have the frame for that after seeing him this summer. But what he is he's still he's your number 3 end. He's a defensive end. He's going to be right behind Chris Burgess. He's a try-hard kid. He's a quality athlete. Like I like the athleticism didn't take a big drop for me. Like that's still good. It's still quality athlete. But he doesn't show me the frame anymore to be that kind of. That I thought not anymore. I thought on film he would have to be kind of that real dynamic, just be the next. He was the next Riley Mills potentially the next Riley Mills for me. Super productive high school kid, really good motor, just doesn't have that. Didn't take that jump that I was hoping he would take as a senior, athletically, and then combine that with the frame. His grade went down a little bit for me, but he's still borderline 4-star kid. I have him in 4-star range. If that's your 3rd end, that's pretty good. You know what I mean? It's just, it sounds negative because of what he was before, but he's still a good football player. If I wouldn't have said anything about what I thought of him before and just said what I like about him, high motor, super productive, decent length, quality athlete, could be a really good multi-year rotation player for you at defensive end. You'd be like, all right, cool, good pickup. But because I'm trying to be honest about where I had him and where I have him now, then you know, it sounds more negative, but he's still a good football player. And I feel better about it because before I thought your end was going to be Burgess 1, Reiff 2, Hulac 3. And now it's like Hulac jumps up to 2 and Reiff is still kind of close to where he was before. Now overall, my defensive end grade is much better than what it was. Like if I was going to split these grades between defensive tackle and defensive end, this is a B+ defensive end class for me. Borderline, not there yet, borderline A-, but if you really like Hulac even more than me, you may go there. But for me, it's a solid B+. Like it's a top 10-ish caliber defensive end group. The issue is inside. That's more of the issue. Davon Dixon, his grade is gone down a little bit for me. I still like Davon. I still think he brings value to his class. He's 6'1", he's 315. Incredibly productive high school player. This is a kid with a couple hundred tackles, 40, 50 tackles for loss in his career. Benefited greatly by going to Miami Palmetto the last 2 years and getting an up in competition. But as he got bigger, he got a lot stiffer. He's now listed as 6'1", 316. He got a lot stiffer, which is a concern. Can they work that out of him at Notre Dame? That's going to be the key. Can you keep his weight up, but maybe get him more flexible? If they can do that, then Davon goes back to being what I hoped he would be, which is a really quality playmaking-ish type of nose, like 4-star, top 200 kind of guy. That's what I had him when they got him. Now he's more of a plugger. You know what I mean? He's more of a Sean Sevillano plugger type of guy, not the guy that's going to be that playmaker. And when I look at that, I say, okay, that he's now down a little bit on my board, different type of. But the thing is, you still need that though. They still need that. Last year you got a 340-pound kid in Sean Sevillano. This year you get a 315-pound kid in Davon Dixon. That's good. You want more beef up there. That's a good thing.
Right.
If Davon can kind of find his motor didn't run as hot as it did when he was younger this past year. You know, like not that he was late. He wasn't lazy. He was like, it wasn't bad. It just was like, he didn't have the same kind of as he did when he was younger. If he can get back to that, I think he's going to be all right. He's going to end up being all right. He's going to end up getting back closer to his upside. But just right now, he gives you beef, which you need. He's got that short, stocky, I can eat up space that you need. He's going to have to improve his technique when you talk about anchoring. He's going to have to get in a little bit better conditioning, you know, and work on his. But his first step is still really good. But I think what the extra weight kept him from having that closing speed on the ball carrier and the quarterback that he had when he was younger. Well, that's something where a training staff like Notre Dame's can say, we're going to keep you big, but you're going to get that flexibility back a little bit. We're going to get that burst back a little bit. If they can do that, then Davon goes way up my board again. Because if you could get the playmaking ability he had as a sophomore with the size that he has now, he's going to be a dude. It's just right now, I'm not seeing those two things being present at the same time. I saw the one on the sophomore film and the other on the senior film, but not together. So that's where Davon is a little bit of a wild card for me. All right. If he learns to become Lauren Lando's best friend, me dropping him in my rankings he's gonna make me look stupid when it's all said and done. Right. And I love that. I like when guys make me look stupid when I don't have him ranked as high. You know what I mean? But Davon is that kind of kid where I'm going to look back and be like, dude, I should have trusted my initial grade on him. I should have kept him as a top 150 guy. And now I look like an idiot because, you know, he's a 3-year starter at Notre Dame and I had him as a borderline 4-star kid. You know what I mean? He's got that ability, Trev. It's just, it's going to have to all click. And right now it's not quite clicking where I want it to be.
Sure. And to your point, those are the reasons why you go and you get into a top end collegiate strength and conditioning program. But if there's one thing that I took away from his film, he is strong. That is a strong kid, man. I mean,
he's going to eat up space now.
Yeah. That is a strong kid.
Like what I'm saying, Trev, is like I saw him as a borderline 4-star kid.
Yeah.
Because he's strong and he's going to eat up space.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
What I loved about Davon when they first got him is he was a playmaker too. Like he was he was a playmaker. He's just not, that part of it doesn't project as well, but it's still a good football player, still a very good pick.
Oh, yeah.
I'm happy with him. And then the last kid, and this is the biggest disappointment in the class, is Gordy Sulfsted. Not a disappointment that he did anything wrong. He hurt his knee before the season and was out for the year. I was so excited to see Gordy Sulfsted senior film because this is a very intriguing kid, Trevor. And so, I can't raise his grade. And if anything, the grade goes down a little bit because now you've got the injury concern. So he's now the lowest graded kid in the defensive class, but the upside doesn't change. I get bummed about Gordy Sulfsted, and then I go back and watch the junior film, and you're like, all right, cool. All right, if he let Al Washington, let Lauren Landau, let Al Golden get this kid, let him cook in the oven for a couple years, and then he's, you know what I mean? Because I love that he's 6'4", he's listed 6'4" by Notre Dame. He's got really long arms. They had him playing on the edge a lot in high school, and he was a good high school end, right? Good high school end, like all-state kind of guy. But then they'd move him inside at times and put him over to guards, and he was a dude. And you could see that projection, all right, when he fills out and he becomes an inside guy, and his dad played in the NFL 320 pounds, he's going to fill out. His dad was Alex Sulfsted, played at Miami of Ohio, and there was in the NFL for a few years, was a 6'3", 320-pound offensive lineman. Gordy's going to fill out. But that's why I was so excited to see a senior film, Trev, because I think they were going to play him inside more. And on inside, he is the guy that now is that could be your next Riley Mills type of guy. 6'4", super long arms, broad shoulders, great frame. I think he'll end up being a 295 to 305 athletic playmaking 3 technique. I love the tools. So he's one of those boomer bust type of guys because he's so raw, because he's got to put on a bunch of weight, because he's, has the ACL, really low floor right now. But as long as everything went right medically with the knee, and that doesn't have the devastating effect it did 10, 15, 20 years ago, he's got a chance that if he clicks, he could be the biggest surprise of this class, of anyone. Because I see it. It would not shock me if Gordy Sulfsted is having the same kind of production at some point in time of his career that Riley Mills is having right now. I think he's got that type of upside. It's just Riley was a much better player coming into college. Riley was ready to play right away. Riley played as a true freshman. The only reason he's playing now still is because of COVID. That's why he played 5 full seasons at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
It's because of COVID, the COVID year. This kid, to me, is going to be more of a redshirt him, and maybe you don't hear again from him in 2026 either. And all of a sudden, that spring of 2027, we're like, whoa, what the heck is Gordy Sulfsted doing balling out against the offense? You know what I mean? He's that kind of kid. And the next thing you know, by the time he's a senior, 5th-year senior, you're like, this is a football player right here, man. This kid can play. He's just going to need time. And so there's that. It's like what I was talking about before, that boomer bust type of thing. He may end up never playing a meaningful down in Notre Dame. That wouldn't surprise me. It also wouldn't surprise me if he becomes Riley Mills. And that's the risk you run when you're bringing in kids like this.
Right.
That's the risk you run when your class is made up of Dom Hulacs and Joseph Reiffs and Davon Dixons and Gordy Sulfsteds. Is none of them have the floor. Burgess's floor is really high, even though he's super raw, because he's so freaking big and strong and athletic. These other kids are Chris Burgess is physically built to play college football right now. None of those other kids are. They're either conditioning wise or size wise. That's the issue with this D-line class. But if they hit on between Reiff, Dixon, Hulac, and Gordy, if they hit on one of the inside guys, either Gordy or Davion, and they hit on one of the edge players, either Hulac or Reiff, and Burgess is what we think is, this is going to end up being a really good defensive line class. But the grade is a little lower because it is so much projection. Does that make sense? I mean,
totally.
And that's where the grade is down, but it's got a chance to be really good. But this is why you needed to go get a Marco Jones. Yeah. This is why I believe the staff, one of the biggest mistakes this staff made was not pushing for Marco Jones. Because I think Marco would have given you more of that true twitchy edge viper type of kid that you could have combined with a Hulac, who's more of a Botelho type. I think that Marco Jones is more of a Logan Thomas, Boubacar, long, twitchy type of pass rusher. They would have been a great 1-2 punch there. That was a mistake. I mean, I like what they've done. If the only thing they would have done different in this class, take the same 5 kids we just broke down, but add Marco Jones to this class, it's an A- to A defensive line class. You'd have numbers. You'd have all the positions filled. You'd have 2 super high ceiling guys in Burgess and Marco Jones. You'd have you'd have Hulac who had a jump. You'd have the upside guy of Gordy Sulfsted. You'd have the beef of Davon Dixon and the just quality of Joseph Reiff. And I'd be super fired up about this class. And so that's what I say. I can't say that it's a bad class. Some people, it's not very good. It's not good enough. Well, I mean, yeah, it needs to get better, but like you can't say if they only added this one guy, then they would be all of a sudden a great class. Well, it means they were really close to being a great class, but now you got to get that one guy. That's the tool. Right. That's the thing for next year. Coach Washington did some really good things in this class. Now next year, keep doing this, but now go get the Marco Jones type.
Yeah.
Go get another Bryce Young type whose dad isn't a Notre Dame Hall of Famer. Like that's the thing is like if Bryce Young was just some guy, does he come to Notre Dame? We don't know that. We don't know the answer to that because his dad was a Notre Dame Hall of Famer. And that's going to be the key for Coach Washington. Is I like this class. You're just that one really twitchy edge guy away from this being a big time D-line class. Now next year, go get that.
Yeah,
that's the key.
Yep, absolutely. So what was your overall grade for this class? You grade them out at a B. You said
the D-line Hall is B.
Okay.
Yeah. And if I had to, like, if they'd have got Marco Jones, it's probably A- is where I'd be. And if I had to say, it's a B- for the current grade of what they are now because the injury to Gordy and the upside, but it's a B+ in upside. So I settled on B.
Okay,
if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's make the jump over to linebackers. And we touched on it a little bit at the start of the show, but big news coming out of the linebacker room for recruits. What do you got for us for the linebacker room, Bryan?
I went A-. And again, I don't hand out many A's, right? I give 3 of them in this class, and 2 of them are on defense. But this is an A-. The only reason it's an A- is because I look, full disclosure, I don't have a lot of film of Josiah Kia. There's a couple highlights out there, but he's an unknown to me. And that drags the grade down a little bit. Now, again, people I've talked to that I respect, they really like the kid. But I can't grade a kid and evaluate a kid based off what other people think about him. I need to see it. And that hurts his grade. That's why he's going to be, I'm not even going to give him a grade in this. When I do my grades class, I won't even give him a grade because it's just not enough for me to grade him on, Trev. It just isn't. So he's a bit of an unknown. So that's, all honesty, that's the thing that drags it down to an A- because I just don't know about him. And that's just trying to be fair about that. The 2 that I do know about is really good. And that's what gets you the A-. You have Anthony Sacca and Madden Farao. These are 2 outstanding football players, Trev. I mean, just outstanding football players. Yeah. Let's talk about Madden first, because that's the new one. That's the guy that has everybody fired up. I mean, this is a kid that's 6'3", 225. He's got the frame to be thick. He's not as thick as Kingston is, but he's got a similar overall body type, where Kingston's 240, this kid will be 230, that kind of thing. But his short area athleticism and explosiveness is outstanding. I mean, his ability to plant and draw. I mean, he's got a different body type. I'll say this. He reminds me a lot. This is going to sound crazy. And he's not quite as good because he's still the second best, the best linebacker that Notre Dame's ever signed, in my opinion, out of high school, is like of my lifetime is Manti. Jalen Smith was the most explosive athlete. But as far as just the best high school linebacker that I've ever seen Notre Dame sign in my lifetime, so this goes back into the late 90s, is Manti. And Madden reminds me a lot of Manti. Is in that he's an elite in the box athlete. Now, I thought Manti got a little too big at Notre Dame, and he lost a little bit of a step from what he was in high school, to be honest. I don't know why I keep saying that. D-Troll Hunter called me on that yesterday. I'm always honest, so I don't know why I say that. It's just like a verbal twitch. But Madden is very similar to what Manti was coming out of high school, athletically and body type wise. A little bit taller, a little bit longer than Manti. Short area quickness is outstanding. He gets downhill in a hurry. He's got an outstanding football IQ, just like Kingston did. Just really smart kid, powerful, versatile. And what I mean by that is Madden's the type of kid that can play Mike. He's smart enough. He's instinctive enough. He's athletic enough, and he's powerful enough. He knows how to take on blocks. He knows he can get the defense lined up. His ability to read blocks, to get off blocks, to beat blocks with his technique is outstanding. He's got all the tools to be a really, really good Mike linebacker. Thing I love about him, though, Trev, is he's also got all the tools you need to be a really good will linebacker. He's really good in coverage. He's rangy. So he's not just short area quick, but he's a bit lumbering. That's not him. He's short area quick, and he's got really good long speed as well as a linebacker. He can drop into coverage. He can get up underneath curl routes. He can cover tight ends. He can cover backs out of the backfield. There's times where he's pedaling in coverage, and you're like, dude, that's like, you see high school safeties that would be envious of that back pedal right there. He can flip his hips, and he also can rush the quarterback. He doesn't do it a ton in high school, at least that I've seen, but when he does, you're like, that kid can go. And when I mean, a lot of people talk about moving him to Viper. I don't know, maybe they could do that. When I talk to my sources at Notre Dame, they don't talk to me about Viper. They talk to me about linebacker. But he also is a lot like Kingston in that third down package. You could put him on the edge and say, go get the quarterback. And he's got the explosiveness, the instincts, the feel to win on that. Because like when you watch Kingston make plays this year, it's like he's got that one play where he's coming off the edge and he just dips and rips and gets on. Like that's just a wicked smart football player that's really athletic. Madden has that kind of ability. And I love that about him. He's a very, very, very intriguing player. And then, of course, you have the other top 100 linebackers, Anthony Sacca. Now, Anthony Sacca was one of the guys I was most interested to see as a senior. Here's why. His sophomore safety film was outstanding. And I had him as a borderline top 50 player. Then he put on a bunch of weight as a junior and moved to linebacker. And it was still really good, but it wasn't quite as good as a safety. He was now a borderline top 100 guy for me. So my question was, well, how would he be in year 2 with all the extra weight? Would he move a little better? Would he get a little bit more twitchy? Would he get a little bit more explosive? And that's exactly what he did. And you saw the athleticism that he showed at safety come back a little bit. They played him a lot in the slot this year on top of playing inside linebacker. Fluid, rangy. The coverage instincts are there from his time playing defensive back, because I'm sure you probably saw one of the people listed him as still as a safety, and that's probably why you had him as a safety. That just tells you a lot about recruiting services and how great they are at evaluating players. They still list that kid as a safety who's now 225 pounds, 6'3", 225. He just handled the weight a lot better. His change of direction was a lot cleaner. A lot of times when guys get that extra weight, their initial step is still really good, but their closing speed goes bye-bye, right? And that's what happened to Anthony last year, I felt, in the box. Now, once he got a head of steam, he could move now, but that closing speed in the box wasn't there. This year it was. I mean, he would close. There's a couple times where it's like, oh, I think he's got an angle, and then just like, boom, just that last 3-4 steps just explodes to the running back. So Anthony's grade went up for me. I know some other people are dropping him. Not for me. His grade went up for me. He's now cleanly inside the top 100 for me now. And this is like Kingston grades higher than anyone in this year's class, even higher than Madden. But Anthony grades out much higher than what Bodie Cahoon and Teddy Rizak graded out. And I liked those guys, but he is a top, where Bodie I had in the top 250. Teddy was more of an upside guy, skinny, raw, but really athletic, and he was an upside guy. This kid is great right now. It may not be that way in college because Bodie had a ton of upside, but Anthony as a prospect coming out of high school is graded out significantly higher than what Bodie Cahoon did, which makes this linebacker haul overall better than last year's class. Because last year's linebacker class got a B+, because Bodie and Teddy were such projectable kids. Bodie had a great senior year, but still had a lot to learn about linebacker. Teddy was an elite athlete that basically played rover. That's 6'4", 195, and had a lot to learn, but he was really athletic. So last year's class was Kingston was the rock, and then there was a bunch of projectable upside guys, a lot like the D-line, where if it hits and those kids tap into their potential, that's going to be an elite A linebacker haul. But they're raw. This group is more 2 rock-solid top 100 guys, and then your third guy, I don't know a lot about. But from what I hear, he's probably in the Bodie or the Teddy Rizak, or probably more Bodie Cahoon, really productive high school player, athletic, can run and hit, but just is going to need time. He's not as big. Notre Dame listed him at 6'1", 209. I think he's a little bigger than that now. A lot of times they'll put the weight on there that's like what the kid measured in when he first visited, and this kid's been visiting for years. Looks a little bigger than 6'1", 209. Bodie to me, or Anthony to me, is more of a will that could maybe play rover. Josiah, from what little I've seen, is kind of a bit of a do-it-all. He can play some rover in some run situations. He can play will. He could maybe rush the passer as well. I don't have a lot to say about Josiah because everything I just gave you is literally off highlights. That's it. And not many highlights at that. So that's the thing that keeps us from being an A grade. When you've got 2 easy top 100 players in your class, that's going to be some sort of A. If I just knew a little bit more about Josiah, I might be able to bump this grade up to an A, but I can't in good conscience do that when one of the kids in the class, a third of the class, I don't have much of a feel for because there's just not a lot of film.
Fair enough. Yeah, absolutely. So another question I have for you then, because your description of Anthony Sacca sounds a lot like the transition that Drew Tranquill made when he was at Notre Dame. So do you see similarities there?
That's the perfect comp for him. He's longer than Drew was, but athletic. Now, I don't know if he's quite as – we'll have to see if he's as – the one difference between him and Drew, I think Drew might have a little bit more just raw speed.
Okay. I
mean, Drew ran a 4.58 at the combine.
Yeah.
Anthony's a lot more fluid than Drew was. Drew's an athletic guy, but like he had pretty decent hips, but he was a little bit tight, change of directions at times. Like I'm saying that when I'm evaluating like a high level player. I mean, I've told this story before, but we were at the pro day, and it was him and Tavon Coney working out, and the scouts are trying to get him to drop back and flip their hips on the line, and they're having him run like on the 20-yard line. The reason you do it on the line is because you want to see if when a guy opens up his hips, does he drift? Because if he drifts, he's got tight hips. Makes sense. Drew was pretty much like right on that line when he would flip. Tavon turned it into a zigzag drill. Really tight hips. Yeah. And Tavon dropping back was not his strength. Tavon was coming downhill. So Drew's not like that, but Anthony's really smooth, really fluid. But in the other areas, like the long range, the speed, the instincts, the body type, Anthony's also longer than Drew was. Drew had very short arms.
Yeah.
Anthony's got longer arms than Drew had. But as far as the transition, you're spot on. And the type of player he was, spot on. If you're going to play a 4-2-5 rover defense like Elko played with Drew, where that third guy's like a true linebacker, but one that plays in space, Anthony Sacca could absolutely play that position. If it's going to be sort of like the nickel type of rover that Al Golden uses, I don't know if he's ideally suited for that, but I'd give him a try because he's really smart in coverage. He's really smooth and fluid, and he's got pretty decent long speed. So I'd give him a shot there, absolutely. But I know he can play at will. And I think Anthony in time could be another guy that in third down could be Jalen Sneed. Not so much Kingston, but Jalen Sneed, that just really and he's 2 inches taller than Jalen and has longer arms. So it seems to be, at least he looks like it on film.
Sure.
I could see him playing that role where Madden would be more of the Kingston edge rusher. This kid could be more of that fast off the edge guy, but I love this linebacker class. And now 3rd year in a row that Notre Dame has just landed an elite. Actually, it's the 4th year in a row that Notre Dame's landed an elite linebacker class. Yeah. It's just the first one was it's 4 now. Yeah. The Burnham, Tui Almaka, Nolan Ziegler, Jalen Sneed class was first. And then you had the Drake Bowen, Jaden Alsbury, Preston Zinner class. and then the Kingston, which is nuts because that's only juniors. And I'm thinking, hold on a second.
Jeez.
But then you had the Kingston, Viliama, Asa, Bodie Cahoon, Teddy Rizak class, and now you've got the Madden Farao, Anthony Sacca, Josiah Kia class, and your defensive end position is now handled because of that linebacker class. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so that worked out pretty well. I don't see a lot of those type of guys in these two linebacker classes per se. I mean, you're not going to have anyone that's going to be Josh Burnham. There's nobody that has that kind of body type. But there's a lot of versatility in this group. So I love this linebacker class.
Good deal. Good deal. Well, let's move on to the corners, which I have a feeling that you said that you had graded out 2 at A grades.
3. One of them was
grades.
we already said the tight end.
Yep, 2 on the defensive side. So if I were a betting man, I'd be willing to assume I know which one it is, but I'll let you kind of take the lead on that one. So cornerbacks.
Well, there's 2 positions left, and there's 2 A grades outstanding. I think we can kind of figure out where it is. I'm just going to say this, bro. This is going to sound super hyperbolic. This is the best cornerback I've ever seen Notre Dame land. And I can't really speak to the 90s classes because back then, most of those guys would be listed at running back. You know, like most of those guys weren't like back then. You had a lot more two-way players. There wasn't as much. You know, Lou Holtz had signed 5-6 running backs. One of them would stay at running back. One would go to receiver. One would go to linebacker. One would go to safety or corner, things like that. Right? Like Jeff Burris started at cornerback, and you know, so it's a little different then. But so I'm talking more of like when I really started following recruiting, like around 2000, 2002, when I really was like old enough to understand it, old enough. I mean, I was, 2000, I was in college, you know what I mean? I was playing. So like late 90s, maybe when I was in high school is when I, really started looking at it. And I don't know that it's all that close. I really don't. This is a special cornerback class, in my opinion. Dallas Golden is a star. Mark Zachary's a top 100 recruit, and Cre Thomas is Cre, and if you look back in the last 15 years, Cre Thomas would be the number 1 cornerback in the class I'd be willing to guess over half of those classes. I'd be willing to like bet that pretty easily. And we'd be sitting in 5-6 years ago, we'd be talking about Cre Thomas as like, oh my gosh, this was such a huge pickup because you needed this type of quarterback. You know what I mean? Like that's what we'd be talking about. And, to see him now, it's like he's the number 3 guy and he's an afterthought in this class. Just tells you everything you need to know about how good this cornerback class is. You know what I mean? Because, there's years like, it's like I think of that 09 recruiting class Notre Dame had, right? And you had, think about who Notre Dame landed in that class. On this, in 2009, and how special it could have been especially on defense. But that class had Tyler Eifert, Sear Wood, Theo Riddick, Chris Watt, Zach Martin, Manti Te'o, Zeke Mata, and then you look at the DB class, and it's like EJ Banks. That's literally it. It's the entire DB class. Zeke Mata ended up playing safety. EJ Banks was your corner, and he was a quarterback in high school. And you just kind of look at that every year, and you had a lot of those type of years, man. And you could just go years after that, years before that. There's a year where your cornerbacks are Low Wood and Spencer Boyd. And now you look and you're like, Cre Thomas would have been the dude in that class. Legitimately the dude in that class. Legitimately like, oh my gosh, I'm fired up about Cre Thomas. And now like nobody talks about him because of how good Dallas Golden Mark Zachary. But I'm telling you folks, Cre is a ball player now. And I called a buddy of mine before the show, and he was another one of those. Because there's certain people I trust that if you tell me you think I'm wrong on a kid, I'm going to go back and evaluate it again with an open mind because I trust your instincts and your results. And so I called one buddy of mine, and I said, man, there's 2 dudes that I am the most shocked by how much better they got. And he goes, I know who you're talking about, Bryan. I said, okay, you know the 2 of 25. I said, all right, cool, bet. Tell me who they are. One on defense, one on offense. I'm like, okay, he's off to a good start. Defense, Cre Thomas. I'm like, yep, you got it. He goes, offense. He goes, he's a pass catcher. And I was like, yeah, you nailed it. He nailed it because we had the same opinion. He liked Cre as a junior, just like I liked Cre as a junior, top 150 guy, probably a little closer to top 200 than top 100. His senior film was really good, Trev, really good. Fluid, speed took a jump, playmaking took a jump. He's playing corner, he's playing safety, he's returning kicks. And we know the kind of competition he plays because we watched Benjamin Morrison dominated that same high school. Cre went from a top 150 to 200 kid to his grade is like borderline top 100 now. And he's your number 3 corner. Like I see your face when I'm talking about Cre Thomas. So you had the same reaction that I did when you broke down his senior film.
Yeah.
Like this kid got even better than he was.
Yeah.
Loved Cre's film. And nobody talks about him because he's been committed for so long and the recruiting rankings don't love him. But this kid is good. He is good, Trev.
Yeah. I mean, he's a great football player. And the speed jump to me is what kind of made it eye-popping from his junior to senior year, because he would close on the football well his junior year, but the speed is what, like, it literally turned those into interceptions. Like, literally, like,
break
that's
up.
what.
It's a great way of putting that, Trev. So balls he would have broke up last year.
Yeah.
Now he's stepping in. Or balls he would have hit the guy as soon as he caught it. Now are breakups. That's a great point.
Yeah, because he's just that step or two quicker. And that's what, to me, that's what showed, like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So your junior year, you were good. Like, you were a good corner. Your senior year, now you are okay. Okay. I see you. Mm-hmm.
Then you got the other 2 kids. And you've got Mark Zachary, who, again, I had as a top 100 kid when they signed him. Mark Zachary's had a very interesting evolution for me as a football player. When I first saw sophomore film, I liked it. I didn't love it. I saw a smart kid, a really fluid athlete. Like, he looked like a point guard playing cornerback, which is exactly what he is. He led his high school team to a state championship. But I was like, okay, good play. This is like the traditional good corner that Notre Dame landed. This is the Julian Love type. This is the guy that and Julian Love ended up being a heck of a player at Notre Dame. But, like, what hurt Julian going to the National Football League? Not real fast. Good, really good athlete. More twitchy and quick than fast. Smart, try hard, tough kid, all that stuff. That the Cole Luke types, right? Like, maybe not like high level NFL guys, but and that's what Mark was as a sophomore. And then as a junior, he got better. Graded him out as a top 100 guy, like bottom of the, like, probably like 90 to 120-ish type of range is where I kind of had Mark as a junior film. Really good 2-way player in high school, really good cover guy, more of an athlete than he was necessarily a football player. Now, instinctively, he was a good football player. Technically, is where he needed a lot of work, but just a really good high school football player. What's sad is his senior year, he played on a far worse team, but he was way better. Like, they were state champs as a junior, and then this year, I think they had a losing record, but he was way better, like way better. He got stronger. He got faster. He was more dynamic athletically. He was more of a playmaker, dominant receiver. Like, Mark Zachary could play receiver at Notre Dame. I don't know that he'd be like a high-level receiver, but he could play a receiver at Notre Dame. And then you talk about, like, he's super long. He's 6 foot, a little skinny, but he's a strong kid for his size. You hear everything anyone, and I don't know if you have anything to add to this, if you know anybody that knows him, but, like, the people that I talk to that connect down in Indy, they say this kid's, like, football IQ and more so leadership and character are just top shelf. Like, this is the kind of kid that will be a captain for you someday. And that's why he's the point guard on the basketball team and the captain on the football team and all those type of things. This kid has got a lot of that stuff, but he's also, he's not, like, sometimes when you say that, smart kid, high football IQ, try hard guy, you're thinking, oh, well, he's probably not very athletic then, huh? Like, when you start talking about character, it's like, okay, sure, he's going to be a captain, but he's going to be that captain that you hope isn't starting.
Yeah.
That's what makes Mark so unique. It's because he's got all that, but he's also a really good athlete. And he turned into a really good football player by his last 2 years, to where he's now an easy top 100 guy for me now. And that's your number 2 in this class, Trev.
Yeah. I mean, there's just something when you look at Mark Zachary and what he does on the football field, for whatever reason, the football just finds him, or he just finds the football. I mean, it's, just every fumble just kind of bounces his way. You know, I mean, he does a really good job of high pointing the football for a corner. To your point about how he could go and play wide receiver, he has really good ball skills as a corner. But no, everything that I've heard about him is in the same boat. He's very well spoken. He's a very smart kid. He's a genuine kid. So excited for him to be at Notre Dame. I mean, and again, to your point, he's the second best corner in this class, which is nuts.
It's like, let's look at his production from this season. And it's insane to me that some of these recruiting services dropped him in the rankings. Rivals dropped him completely out of their top 2. And they've done so many good things in the last couple of years, but they've had some bad misses this year. On3 has him at number 111. That's the very bottom of what I would find acceptable. 247 has it 175, ESPN at 220. This kid is closer to top 50 than he is top 150, in my opinion. But then you look at his senior year production, Trev, and he is, as a senior, he had 62 tackles, 8 interceptions, 4 tackles for loss, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery, 2 blocked punts, and 2 defensive touchdowns. And, oh, by the way, he did that while teams avoided him. Did I mention that he had 8 interceptions as a guy that people didn't throw at that much? And then, Trev, he had 58 catches for 1,036 yards and 12 touchdowns. This is like, and it's funny because like Christian Gray was a lot like that for me.
Yeah.
Liked him early, didn't love him, and he just got better and better every year. And then by the time he was a senior, like, this is a dude. And that's how Mark Zachary is. Like, Mark Zachary would probably be the number 1 cornerback in a Notre Dame class every year in the last 20 years, except with the exception of 3 others. This one, the year that Christian Gray signed, and the year that Benjamin Morrison signed on my grading system. Before that, I don't know that Notre Dame signed a better corner than him. The closest that you could find is if you go back to, I loved Darren Walls coming out of high school back in 06. Darren Walls was a dude.
Yeah, he was.
But he grades out better than all those guys. Except since Darren Walls in 06, I'll say he would have been the number 1 cornerback in every single class until the Morrison class, the Gray class, and then this year with Dallas Golden. And if you were to say, hey, Brian, I'm gonna argue with you. I think Mark Zachary's better than Dallas Golden as a corner. I'd say, all right, I'm not gonna argue with you on that. I take Dallas, but my feeling of Dallas is you could argue that Christian right now or Mark right now is a better corner than Dallas Golden right now. I think Dallas is the better football player.
Yeah.
And once he starts specializing on one position, then I think his game's going to take off. But if you were to say today, December 4th, Mark Zachary and Dallas Golden, if they both played cornerback, Mark would be the better player. It's okay. We could debate that if you want, but I'll just say, okay, I'm not going to, I don't think so strongly about it that I'm going to argue with you about it. Like, well, okay, you might have a point. I think Dallas is better, but that's how good Mark Zachary has become as a football player for me. Because you know how much I like Dallas Golden.
Oh, yeah.
And that leads us right into the number one cornerback in this class, which is Dallas Golden. This is a special football player. I've said this before. This kid could start at Notre Dame at 7 different positions.
Yeah.
Field corner, boundary corner, nickel, field safety, boundary safety, running back, and slot receiver. Yeah. Yeah. That's a special football player. Now, specifically about corner, Dallas needs a lot of technical work at corner. He's going to need a lot of experience at corner. That's why it would not shock me if early on they have him in the slot. Because I think his skill set, he's a 6 foot, 180, 185 pound kid. He's a guy that's a really tough running back. He's fast. He's incredibly elusive. He's very athletic. He's a guy that you look at, Trev, and you're just like, this guy's just a great football player. You're like, where do you want to play him? Wherever he wants to play. That's where you play Dallas Golden. I just personally like him more at corner because I think his upside is greatest at corner. That's how I feel about him. And when you look at the production, the kid's just been a heck of a football player, heck of a productive football player in his career. A guy that's ran for over 3,000. I'm going to pull up his yard. I believe he's been over 3,000 yards the last 2 years rushing. He's a kid that makes a lot of plays defensively. He makes plays in the return game. Let me see here. So, yes, rushing. So, Dallas Golden has actually been over 1,000 yards each of the last 3 years. In the last 3 years, Dallas Golden rushed for 3,908 yards in Tampa, Florida at Berkeley Prep. Averaged 7.2 yards per carry, 17 games of over 100 yards, 47 touchdowns. Also, over the last 3 years, he's caught 74 passes for 980 yards, 13.2 per catch, and 11 touchdowns. He's had at least one catch of over 50 yards each of the last 3 years. That's his offensive production. You know what I mean? Like, this is a kid that's got a lot of talent, a lot of tools. He's also a kid that last year was over 25 yards per kick return, and this year was over 12 yards per punt return. You know, this is a special football player, Trevor. And as a corner, he's going to need a lot of work. And that's why I think putting him in a slot could be good, because you're playing a little bit tighter area. It's a little bit more of a physical game. You don't have as much ground to cover. Let him learn that, and then maybe work on him outside. They may go the opposite and start him outside and then let him learn and then move him inside. Don't really care. The reality is this kid can play. I wish he was an early enrollee. That's my only bummer. But, you know, Benjamin Morrison wasn't an early enrollee, and he was a dude. If you're a dude, you're a dude. You know, You're going to have all summer. You're going to have June, July, all that time to get to learn stuff and get acclimated. But this kid is it's a special football player. Loose hips, strong. Doesn't look it because he's not a real thick kid, but he's really strong. Easy athleticism, great balance, and a lot faster than you think he is. And I remember talking to my buddy John Garcia, who liked this film and seen him in live. He's like, but I really want to see him at camp. I want to see what he looks like just playing corner at camp. And John was like, yep. He was that good because he went to the Rivals 5-Star Challenge. Lot to learn technically, but it's not to the point where it bothers me, because number one, Mike Mickens is the corners coach in Notre Dame. But number two, Dallas is just, it's one of those things where when a kid does this much, he's not going to be a technically proficient player, but he'll learn it real fast. And that's who Dallas Golden is. This is a top 50 football player. He grades out as a 4.5-star player for me with 5-star upside. He's that good. He's that good of a player. And so you've got him, you've got Mark Zachary, you've got Cre Thomas. They're excellent players. It's a talent, but here's the best part about it, Trevor. You can play these three kids together and not moving one of them to safety. You could put Mark in the boundary and put Cre at field and Dallas in the nickel. You could put Mark in the boundary and Dallas or Mark in the slot, Dallas in the boundary. You could put Cre in the boundary and Mark to the field and Dallas in the. I mean, any three of those combinations. There's going to be one that they probably like the best, but I proposed two different scenarios to a source I have close to the program, and they're like, "Yep, those are exactly kind of what we're thinking." It's just this. We'll try them all out a little bit and see who's most natural here. But like, that's what they loved about this trio, and they did it on purpose. They wanted guys that could play together. You don't have 3 field corners, 3 boundary corners. You have kids that can play all of them. So that way, whoever's ready the fastest can play wherever. And that's important, because if you have 3 really good corners, but they all kind of play at one position, then, you know,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Go ahead, Trev.
I was just going to say, it was just more on the lines of Dallas Golden. I mean, that kid is insane. Like I said at the start of the show, I'm not really that versed in recruiting yet, but he has been somebody that I've been watching for a while, and he is nuts. I mean, legitimately, if he chose to be recruited as a receiver, he would have been a top receiver recruit. If he would have chosen to be a running back,
it's a 4-star.
He would have been. I mean, it's crazy because sometimes you hear about the guys who it's like, well, I was a 2-way player in high school. It's like, well, you were just the most athletic guy on your team. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yes. Like, I played corner as a senior in high school just because I was the best athlete.
Yeah.
We had for that. I was corner.
Yeah. I mean, we had guys for us that would play, you know, running back and safety because they were just more athletic than the people that only played safety. You know what I mean? But Dallas Golden is a guy that if he would have chosen to do it, like the intangibles that he has as a football player, like he was a good wide receiver. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? He was a great running back. Like,
I want to say this too, because this gets said a lot, Trev. Well, I want to play him. No, you don't play him on offense. He's a corner. He needs to learn corner. Well, what about having him play both? Here's the one thing about Dallas. Somebody asked me this, I think on the board or in a private message, I can't remember. So would you try him at let him be a two-way player like Champ Bailey and Travis Hunter? I said, no. Dallas is an excellent athlete, but he's not the kind of truly elite 4-3, just you can make up for mistakes because you're just so fast type of athlete that Champ and Travis Hunter are. So they could erase technical mistakes because they were just elite speed guys. I don't think that's what keeps Dallas from being a 5-star.
Yeah.
Is he's fast, but he's not Travis Hunter, Champ Bailey fast. And that's why I'd be real nervous about, having him try to be two-way player because he needs to be more technically proficient. Like one of the questions I was asked in the chat, and it's a great question, said, how would you rank players coming out of high school between Dallas, Benjamin Morrison, and Christian Gray? And my answer is, as high school players, it would, as far as like athletes, it'd be Dallas, Christian, Benjamin. As far as who's the better corner, it's Benjamin, Christian, Dallas. As the all-around football player, it's Dallas, Christian, Benjamin. What makes Benjamin Morrison so special, he's a very good athlete, but he's not an elite athlete. Benjamin is his football IQ is exceptional.
Yeah.
And he's smooth and fluid and long and smart, and his instincts are outstanding. Benjamin Morrison is not if he's eventually a future top 10 NFL draft pick or 15 or 20, it'll be because the athleticism finally got there. But what gets him on people's radar is he is a brilliant football player. He doesn't have Christian Gray's. If he had Christian Gray's athleticism, he'd be a no-brainer top 10 pick. If Christian Gray had Benjamin's football IQ and discipline and all those and feel for coverage, he would be even better. Christian's an elite athlete, still learning the finer points of the game. Benjamin showed up as one of the most advanced mental, technical corners you're going to see. Dallas is more like Christian. Big-time athlete, loads of potential, but the technical part of the game is very much a work in progress. Benjamin also played a lot less two-way than those two guys did. So Benjamin could focus on playing corner, and his dad played in the National Football League as a defensive back. It's kind of like Joe Alt. So he had a little bit of that advantage there. That doesn't take anything away from Benjamin. That's what I loved about Benjamin. That's why I told everyone this kid's a 4-star top 100 guy with 5-star upside.
Yeah.
And my only concern about Benjamin was what's his top level speed, and he needed to get stronger. That's what kept him from being, a 5-star early on. But he had the 5-star upside. With Christian, it was he's got all the athletic tools. He's got to learn the finer points of the position, and that's where Dallas is too. So he needs to learn that. He needs to learn the technical part of the game. He needs to spend that time on that. That's where he needs to be. And when he gets there, he's going to have a chance to be a very, very special player. Very special player.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So a resounding A for
easiest A grade I've ever given in my life for a Notre Dame position group.
Love it. Love to hear that.
Yeah.
So let's transition over to the final level of this defense, and it's the 2025 safety class. What are your thoughts, impact on the 2025 class? Let's hear it.
It's another A. It's an A class that, it's an A. I wrote down A earlier, but as I've kind of reevaluated it, I'm bumping it down to an A-. Just because I do have some, like the third guy is just not as good at safety as the third guy is at corner. And whoever you view that to be, whether that's Brandon Logan or whether Jaydon Blair is flat out as good as anybody that Notre Dame signed in this class. Him and Dallas Golden are just right there, top players in this class. But Mark Zachary is definitely better than Brandon Logan, and Cre Thomas is better than Ethan Long by a decent amount. So I can't give them the same grade as I think through it. So I'm actually going to bump it down to an A- when I release my grades, like written out later tonight. But it's still outstanding. And the thing at corner that I didn't mention, part of the reason they got an A grade is you also met your numbers needs. You needed 3. You needed 3 safeties in this class, in my opinion. They wanted 2, but I felt the need was 3. And eventually they came around to needing 3 as well. It would have been nice to have Ivan Taylor. Sure, I get all that. But I like the kids they landed. Jaydon Blair, we'll start with him. He's the best player in the class. 6'4", 190, smooth, great leaper, instinctive, covers a ton of ground. You watch him run and you're like, how fast is he really? Because he's like that long-limbed guy. And then you watch him chew up ground and you're like, oh, yeah, he's pretty fast. You watch him like – it's like, oh, that crossing route, they might get him. And then all of a sudden Jaydon just turns it on and he just blows it up, Or at receiver, you're like, I don't know how good of a release that was off the line. And then you're just like watching him just pull away from a guy because he's just so long-limbed. It's kind of hard sometimes to tell just how fast he is, but he can run. He can leap. So he's a really good basketball player, smart football player, studies the game, great work ethic, humble kid, but also a kid with some swagger, that's what makes him a Notre Dame fit. Is he's intellectual, he cares about academics, he's a smart. I mean, like if I should send you the interview I did with him earlier in the year, and you're like, that's a high school kid, that's what you'd say, because that's what Sean said to me. Because Sean actually wrote the article. I sent him the interview that I did, and Sean wrote the articles. Super smart kid, super mature kid. We had him on the show, and you listen to his mom and dad, and you're like, oh, okay, now I get why he's that way. His mom was like super sharp, dad is super sharp. But he's also has some swagger to him. He's not that he's humble, but he's humble in that he doesn't need to tell you how good he is. He's going to show you how good he is. And that's where the swagger comes from. He's not really that, let me go tell everybody how great I am. I'm the greatest of all time. He's like, no, I'm going to put in the work. And then when we get on that field, we're going to strap it up. I'm going to show you how good I am. And I love that type of mentality. Dallas Golden's a lot like that. Mark Zachary's a lot like that. Cre Thomas. None of these guys are talkers. They're not like active on social media. I mean, Jaydon's the most active, and he's not. His dad's way more active on social media than Jaydon is. You know what I mean? But he was one of the guys also behind the scenes that was really working as sort of the leader of this class to help get guys into class and all that kind of stuff. He was of the recruits, he played probably the biggest role in helping to get Madden back in the fold. Jaydon, but do you see that on Twitter? No, you don't. He did it behind the scenes. He did it communication, me and you. Let's build a relationship, not the phony. Let me show everyone how much of a leader I am. That's how CJ Carr was. CJ Carr almost never tweeted. He'd tweet every now and then at players. But CJ was the ringleader of that class because CJ was on the phone. He was texting. He was DMing. He was here every time a big-time kid was here, building that relationship. And that's what Jaydon did for his class as well. You didn't see it, but he was doing it.
Yeah.
But I'm not giving you a top 50 grade because you're a great leader. I mean, it's an intangible, but you could be a 3-star and be a great leader.
Sure.
You could be a guy that's playing the Division III level and you're a great leader. Do you have elite talent? And Jaydon's got big time talent. He's athletic. He's smart. He can play. He plays both ways. He's got all the tools, and he's a very and he developed a lot as a football player. If you go back and watch his sophomore film, he was a basketball player playing football. He was just running around. Let me go find the ball. See ball, hit ball. I mean, there wasn't great instincts. There wasn't great technique. And then as a junior, you're like, okay, he figured out how to be a football. And then as a senior, it's like, yeah, okay, that's the dude. That's the dude right there. And so Jaydon Blair is a very special. And then you put a kid like him who can play both safety spots. And then you've got Dallas and you've got Cre and you've got Mark Zachary. That alone right there is an A secondary class.
Yeah.
Because you could move Cre to safety if you needed to and say, all right, we're good. You could move Dallas to safety and Dallas could be a 4-year starter at safety. But then you throw in, they got Brandon Logan and Ethan Long as well. Brandon Logan jumped up as a senior to a 4-star top 250 grade kid on my board. And I believe, I could be wrong on this one, but I actually believe, I thought there was 1 or 2 recruiting services. Yes. On3 jumped him up to a 4-star player. So they actually saw the jump there. I would grade him a little bit higher than that. I had him as a top 250 guy. Still learning the game, but he took a big jump on how to play the game this season. And he's always going to be I think he's going to also play baseball at Notre Dame. So he's going to always kind of do that. but kid can hit. He's instinctive. He's got good speed, really good speed, a lot better speed than I thought he was going to have.
Yeah.
Footwork has got a lot better this year, which allowed him to transition a little bit better. This ended up being a really good pickup. He now is my number 2 graded safety in the class. As I mentioned, Ethan Long, grade didn't he's still a 4-star, but he went down a little bit because I just didn't see the athletic jump that I hoped that I was going to see. But he's a super smart. He's that kid that you praise because of how smart he is and how hard he works and instinctive he is and all that, because he needs to be, because he's not a top level athlete. He's smooth, but he's missing that gear right now. I thought he was going to kind of get that as he gets older, and he still might. He just didn't do it as a senior. He may get to Notre Dame and get with Lauren Landau, and that now all of a sudden he is running a 4.5. But he's probably a 4.6-ish kid right now. Smooth, fluid, instinctive, ton of interceptions in his career. I mean, I think he's close to 20 picks in his high school career. And the only reason he's not there is because they just don't throw at him anymore. I think he had 10 interceptions as a sophomore, something crazy like that. Very instinctive kid, very smart kid. But when you talk about transitioning to the next level, he's going to need to find that gear a little bit to go from a guy that right now is sort of a rotation guy early that becomes a junior, senior year starter. If he wants to be a little bit more than that, it'll be because if he's more than that, it'll be because getting with Lauren Landau, he gets a little bit more juice. That'll be the reason why he maybe passes that up a little bit. Now, the good news is Ethan and Jaydon's a super early enrollee, meaning he's going to be on campus in a week.
Well, yeah,
and he's going to be able to practice with them during the bowl season or the playoff season. Ethan, I think, is more of a true early enrollee. That's going to be important for him, that he's going to be on campus in the spring, because he'll need that weight room time to get stronger and hopefully get a little bit more juice. And if he can figure that out, then his grade jumps up. But I love the talent. I love the instincts. I love the football IQ. I love all that stuff. He just needs to – he's lacking a step. That's what keeps him from really taking that next step as a prospect.
So real quick question here then. More times than not, would you say – because we've talked a lot about some kids in this class that have to kind of get a little faster, kind of work on that next step. More times than not, would you say that when somebody gets into, a collegiate weight training program, are they able to find it, or is it more 50-50? What do you think?
What do you mean? Explain that to me again.
If we talked a lot about just different players in this class needing to get that extra step, like for a guy like Ethan Long, you were hoping he was going to take like that next step athletically and kind of get a little bit faster. Hopefully that's going to be something that is found in Notre Dame's training program. Yeah. So would you say more times than not, do they find it, or is it more subjective person to person?
Well, it's usually, you can see certain body types in like the skinnier kids. Like you think of like a Will Fuller, for example.
Yeah.
They're playing sports year round. They're playing basketball. They're running track. They're not in any kind of committed strength program.
Right.
And so then you get to college and your nutrition changes. You add a little bit of muscle. You get into that in that program, and what it does is it focuses more on the lower body, where a lot of kids in high school focus on the upper body because I want to look good at the pool or at the beach or whatever. You get into college and it's about the powerful stuff that you do in the lower body, and that's where that extra juice comes from. And some kids you look and say, well, I don't think that kid has an extra gear in there. But some kids you look at and you say, I think there's an extra gear in there. And I think there's an extra gear in there a little bit for Elijah Burris. I think there's a little bit of an extra gear in there for Ethan Long. I don't know that there's an extra gear in there for Tabron Benny Powell from what he is. I don't know if there's an extra gear in there from, for some other guys. It's like they're always going to be kind of what they are. Everybody gets a little faster usually when they get to college because they get in the strength program.
Sure.
I'm talking about the guy that goes from running a 4.6 to a 4.48. It's kind of, or a 4.45. Will Fuller goes to the opening out in Oregon for senior year and runs a 4.53, I think is what it was. Because I remember it clear as day, because I remember being out there covering it, and they're reading off the times of all the former guys that are now, great college players or NFL guys. And I remember laughing when they read Will Fuller was like a 4.53, and I'm thinking, that
crazy,
And Will Fuller even said, I wasn't this fast in high school. But he was athletic. You could see the gear. You could see the potential where like this kid gets in a strength program and they start focusing on building up the core and building up the lower body, now all of a sudden that 4-5-3 becomes a 4-4, and that's kind of where I see Ethan. Now, I don't see that in every guy. I don't know that every guy's got that. Oh, I think he's got a couple tenths in there to take off. It's not true of every guy.
Sure.
It is true for some guys. And I think and some of it's wishful thinking. Like with Jerome Bettis Jr., it's not that I think he's got that gear in him. It's I hope he has that gear in him.
Right.
And there's a difference between Ethan Long and Jerome Bettis. Ethan Long, I think that gear's there based on evaluating it and seeing kids like him make a similar jump in college. Then there's other guys you're just like, I don't know if he's really got it in there, and hopefully I'm wrong. So it's more about you evaluate it and you see certain things that make you think that kid's got something left.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I'm at with that.
So to kind of tie this all together, Bryan, what is your overall grade then for this defensive class for 2025?
It's an A-. The only reason I didn't give it an A is because I want the D-line class to be a little bit better. It's got A upside, but I needed that D-line class because that's if the D-line class was like an A and the linebacker class was a B, so you just flip those two grades, I'd say that's an A defensive class. Because I don't need the linebackers to be an A. If I got an A D-line and I got A corners and A- safeties, you know what I'm saying? But the D-line can't be a B or a B-, and your defense is going to still be pretty good, but not as good as it could be if you had an A defensive line and a B- safeties or B- linebackers. You're still going to be really good on defense because you're A at corner and you're A on the D-line. You're going to be a really good freaking defense, even if you have B linebackers. So that's kind of where I'm at is like, there's not that, maybe Burgess can become that guy. Hopefully but I don't, who's that? Maybe I'd feel differently if Gordy would have played his senior year and made the jump that I thought he was capable of. I might feel a little bit different if they'd have landed a Marco Jones, but like that D-line haul, which is good, but not as good as it needs to be, is what drags it down to an A-. But A at linebacker, A at corner, A- at safety, that's really freaking good.
Yeah.
I wouldn't trade this. Even if it meant I'm getting a better D-line haul, I honestly wouldn't. I don't know that I'd trade this defensive class with anybody. This is one of the 3 or 4 best defensive classes in the country on defense. It's special. And I wouldn't trade this secondary class with anyone.
No, not at all. And
I might even disown you as a friend if you were a coach for another team and say, let's trade. Like, don't ever call me again. Dude, I was in your wedding. You were in mine. I don't care. You said, I can't ever trust you again with that nonsense that you just said to me.
You were in my wedding. Well, good thing that was a while ago, bud.
Yeah. Didn't work out, did it? No, I'm just kidding. But like, it's a special defensive back class.
I mean,
it really is.
End of the day, man, if we're talking about something pushing it down from an A to an A-, we're in a pretty good spot. We're in a really good spot as analysts to be able to talk about this team that Notre Dame is bringing on. And
what's interesting, Trevor, is I found, and this is I think I like to let people kind of know what's going on in my head and how I've evolved. And I honestly feel like as I've gotten deeper into the Marcus Freeman era from a grading standpoint, I think I've gotten more critical of the grading because he's changed the bar. This staff, him and Chad Bowden, they've changed the bar to where now it's like, in order to get an A, it needs to be really good. Mm-hmm. I probably would have given this safety class an easy A 3-4 years ago. I might have given this D-line class a B+ or an A- for just, and it's not an intentional thing, but it's almost like the bar was set so low that you just you viewed a class like this as like, oh my gosh, this is so much better than what we've seen the last 5 or 6 years that you almost kind of overinflated it a little bit. Where now it's like, yeah, I mean, there's no Boubacar in this group. There's no, Bryce. There's no this potential top 15 NFL draft pick in this. You know what I mean? And it's like, It's completely changed the bar. And I just, and to the point where I'm instead of giving an A, I'd given it's not like I'd have given it a B-, now, and it would have given it an A 5 years ago. It's like I would have
Right.
given it an A, but now it's like A minus, B plus. I'm just because of the way that the bar has been risen with this coaching staff, and I'd like to. That's more defensively. I'd
Sure.
also say that.
Sure.
I think, but just overall, though, I'd say that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, I mean it's very valid, man. I mean, like that's what we get into the conversations about those elite programs is when you're able to, retain the kind of talent that Notre Dame is able to and attract the kind of talent Notre Dame is able to, especially on the defensive side of the football. You kind of have to be, right? Or else every single recruit, every single player that's coming in that's exciting and has had a really good high school career, you're handing out A+ grades like you're Oprah Winfrey. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But it's a good spot to be in, man. It
Yep.
really is. It really is. Well, we're getting ready to wrap up. We do have a
What are you
couple
about to
super
say?
chats.
Well, Vince is going to be super pissed at you right now.
Uh-oh.
What did you forget?
I don't know what
we got to talk about the special teams grade, man.
We'll make sure when we edit it, we'll cut out this part.
Well, Vince does the editing, so you're screwed no matter what. So
I'm going to call him
man.
and compliment him on I don't think there's ever been a better dean of students at Penn High School. But look,
there you go.
So
go ahead, Trev.
I was going to say, so now that we've wrapped up the defensive portion, we're going to get into special teams, which is something we cannot forget about. So, Bryan, your thoughts on, and it was a late push, but the impact of getting Eric Schmidt in this class?
Huge. And it's huge for a couple of reasons. Number one is I was told as of 3 weeks ago that they were just going to stick in the portal for kickers. And I said at the time, I was like, I don't love that. I don't. But hey, you do you. And I don't know that everybody was on board with that. I don't know what's changed, but because this kid visited campus, this kid kicked at Notre Dame. Like they've been on it for a while. This is some kid that they discovered. They have one of the best kickers in the country in state. This kid's just a little bit better. And this kid's from Wisconsin. There's another kicker in state that's one of the best kickers in the country, in my opinion. Phenomenal leg, kicked multiple 60-yard field goals. They were just going to do the portal.
He's at Northwood, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they were just going to do the portal thing. And so I was like, whatever. And then like about a week ago, I got a call and be like, oh, by the way, this is going to happen. I was like, seriously? That's a change of shift of focus and emphasis. And then if you're going to go do that and you go out and get the best guy in the country and flip them from Wisconsin, and I don't think it hurt their feelings that they flipped them from Luke Fickell's team. I don't think that was necessarily a thing that doesn't get lost on this coaching staff, right, with some of the issues with Luke Fickell. But what makes him unique, so obviously he's the number one kicker in the country. That's part of it. But the other part of it is he's a very unique kicker because a lot of guys nowadays, there's a lot more specialization now with kicking than there used to be. Kids would kick and punt and kick off. Now it's like you're a kicker or you're a punter. Like I was talking with Vince and his son about this the other day, and they were talking about how, well, that kid's a punter. Well, that kid's a place kicker. Well, that kid kind of does both, but he's not really good at that. And with this kid, they view him as all three: punter, kickoff guy, and a place kicker. Now, that's a bit of an evolution because when he first became sort of this big-time prospect, it was more as a punter and a kickoff guy. He wasn't quite as good as on field goals, but he started to focus on it more. He got. I mean, he's a very thick. He looks like a D1 soccer player. You know what I'm talking about? Like those really ripped up calves, and like they're not real big guys, like 6'1", 210, but they got those really just like ripped up calves and really just like thick trunks, and then like prep school hair. That's Eric Schmidt, right? Like he looks like a D1 soccer player, and that is a compliment because he's built like that, real strong-legged kid, and he started focusing more on improving as a field goal kicker and got a lot better this year. And multiple 50-plus yarders. I watched him kick a 48-yarder on film that like it probably landed 25, 30 yards past the stick. I mean, the goalposts. And I mean, he's the kind of kid that if you want him to kick every single kickoff into the back of the end zone, he will. And but he made a name for himself initially as a punter. So he's a kid that eventually you can maybe have do all three. And that's a rare thing. Yeah. It would not shock me. I told you the intel of what This is now my opinion. It would not shock me if they still went out and got a portal kicker this year that was accurate, that in case this kid maybe needs some time to still develop as a place kicker, you can have him do the long ones, and maybe this portal guy is more of the from 40 in and accurate and that type of thing. And then he takes over full-time next year. If Rendell comes back, which I believe right now that's the plan, he'd be the number 2 punter. So it wouldn't shock me if he was like the number 2 at those 2 spots, maybe kicks the long field goals, and he's your kickoff specialist day 1. And then if he figures place kicking out, he can always take over.
Sure.
It would not shock me if that's the route that they went. But the plan is that at some point in time in the very near future, this kid's going to be at least in charge of 2 of those 3, if not all 3. And that's an A. Plus, the other part of special teams is you got a lot of really long athletic safeties and linebackers and corners. So Cre Thomas, Ethan Long, Brandon Logan, let's say that they're not starters on defense someday. They're going to be guys that you're going to want running down on punt coverage and kick coverage. Anthony Sacca, Madden Farao, Dallas Gold, Mark Zachary also add that value, but usually those top-level guys can kind of do that. I mean, there's not a single linebacker, corner, or safety that you look at and say, I don't think that guy could be a really good coverage player on special teams. Then you look at other aspects of it. You've got Antavius Richardson's a real dynamic return man. He might be able to add some return value to you. Dallas Golden's a really good return man. Mark Zachary's a really good return man. So not only did you go out and get your top specific specialists in the country, your coverage units are going to remain strong with this kind of class. And you added some potential playmakers in the return game. So it's not just kicker, punter, snapper. It's also this. Then you signed one of the nation's best snappers last year. And he's already taken over, I believe, long snapping, Joseph Vinci. And he's probably going to be your short and long snapper next year. So that's already locked down. You didn't need that. It wasn't a need for you. And now you bring in the kicker of the present and future. And then you have all these coverage guys, return guys, and you're feeling pretty good about the special teams having the athletes and talent it needs in the future to really rock and roll. And
you probably also locked up Notre Dame's next punt blocker / field goal blocker in Christopher Burgess with how long his arms are. I mean,
you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
That's another role.
Same with Gordy Sulfsted.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's special teams is looking good. And, you even talk about, Bryce Young is on the kickoff unit right now.
6'7", 250, and he's running down covering kicks.
God, you want to talk about a job that I would not want to have.
Yeah.
Is being the return man on any unit where Bryce Young is in coverage. That's just.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
That's crazy.
Hard pass.
Now that is going to do it for the evaluation of the 2025 recruiting class. Before we get out of here, we do have some
and we were going to do the 2-year grades, but we're already 3.5 in. So I texted Trevor that we're going to do that. We'll do those again soon. We'll pick a recruiting time next week where I'll take the 2-year grades. It's just to do that justice, we're going to get way past 4 hours, and that's just a little long for today. Plus, IB Nation Sports Talk is already going on live, so we're already cutting into their time. So we're going to do that another time. So we will do the 2-year grades, but we do have some super chats, Trev.
We do.
Let me do this one real quick from Michael S. Michael, thank you for this. How do you evaluate the D-line recruits? We already broke that down. You put this in before we got to that breakdown, so I appreciate it. I should have brought it up when we started talking about it, but I think we gave you a pretty good breakdown of that. So I wanted to thank you for that super chat, Michael.
Super chat from Casa Hodge. Thank you for the super chat. Hey, Brian, Trev, you might have touched up on it, but is linebacker Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng still in play? Thanks, and I appreciate the IB team.
So he put this chat in the first hour before Owusu-Boateng committed to Michigan. So obviously he was not in play. If you're an IB member, you'd have known this right after the Florida State visit. But I put an intel piece out that week that basically said Notre Dame dropped him. And I'm not going to get into reasons why. I talked about it on the board, but Notre Dame decided he wasn't a fit. And so they moved on. And Madden Farao became the only focus for them, a linebacker. And if they missed on him, then they missed on him. They weren't going anywhere else. I mean, so that's why you saw him when he had he put out a top 2 last night of Colorado and Michigan. Notre Dame wasn't in there because Notre Dame wasn't an option anymore for him. So they were not a player for him. That was their choice. I don't know that they would have got him anyway, to be honest with you, but maybe, but they didn't want him. Speaking of, from Lisa Robinson.
Thank you for the super chat, Lisa. Notre Dame is the new linebacker U.
It's hard to, and it's not even just from recruiting. If you think about it, nobody else in the last 15 years, I believe, has 3 Butkus Award winners. Notre Dame does. You know, when you look at Manti in 2012 and then Jalen Smith in 2015 and then Jeremiah Usu-Koromo in 2020.
Yeah.
You know, you had your 2 starting linebackers from last year, both got drafted in the NFL. And now your linebacking core is even better from a talent standpoint. It's not as experienced and, as last year's group was, but it's talent, it's better.
Yeah.
You know, Drake Bowen's probably going to get drafted at some point in time. Madden's going to, Kingston's going to get is an NFL player. Jaden Osbury's an NFL player. You know, Jalen Sneed, if he's some team signs him and they've got him on all their special teams, wouldn't shock me. You know, I don't know if he's big enough to be an NFL linebacker. You know, and then you look at Madden Faramo's an NFL talent. Anthony Sacca's an NFL talent. This is nobody's recruiting better. You could say maybe there's teams that are on their same level, but you can't say anyone's better than what this group has been in recent years. And I didn't even talk about guys like Bodie Cahoon and Teddy Rizak, who are 4-5 type athletes that are just have a lot to learn.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but those are good football players too, man. So, it's hard for me to argue with that. The results on the field are there. The NFL production is there. The NFL draft production is there. The awards are there. The All-American honors are there, and the film is impressive. So yeah, they're getting there. If they're not there now, they're getting there. And you almost would be disappointed in Marcus Freeman if his football team was not known as linebacker U. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, isn't that kind of a given?
Yeah.
You know, that you kind of got to make it to that point in time, but he's getting there. It's all, a lot of this is Mark. Look, Max Bullow's doing a great job. Al Golden is a part of this. Al Golden's Al Golden's quarterback when he was in college. The guy that threw him the game-winning pass when they beat Notre Dame at Notre Dame, when Al Golden was the tight end at Penn State, was Tony Sacca, who happens to be Anthony Sacca's dad. So Al Golden played a role in that, obviously, but so did Max Bulla and Marcus Freeman.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, you expect a Marcus Freeman-led football team to be really good at linebacker. And guess what? They have been. They recruit there. They produce there. It's just like, you're not going to have Marcus Freeman's football team not be good at linebackers. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
At least it shouldn't happen. And guess what? It hasn't happened. So,
right.
But yeah, that they're definitely getting there.
And then last super chat from Michael S. Thank you for the super chat, Michael. Seemed Greathouse disappeared in the SC game. Reason?
Well, I don't think he did. He just didn't get targeted. He just, he was played a lot. He just didn't get targeted. And they were doing some stuff in the game where they were doing a little bit more 12 personnel in certain looks for matchup reasons.
Yeah.
But no, I just don't think he was targeted. There was just other routes that were there and they were running down their throat. Blocked really well.
Yeah.
He had a really good game blocking. It's one of his better games of the year blocking.
Yeah.
He just didn't get targeted a whole lot after that early reception, but he played a decent amount. He was in there. So Thank you for that, Michael S. Appreciate you, man.
Well, cool, Brian. I think we're good.
Yeah. Jason Smith, man, it was great to see you back in the chat, man. Great to see you in the chat. We're glad to have you back, man. Glad everything's good with you. Glad to have you. So, and there was one question. Jay Henry asked a really good question because talked about the linebacker or the DB class. Then he said, how would I compare it to Oregon's group? And I thought it was something that was worth kind of mentioning is Oregon's got a really good secondary class. They got Brandon Finney, the kid that Notre Dame recruited, Dorian Brew, who Notre Dame recruited, Trey McNutt, who Notre Dame recruited, and Naeem Offord, who they flipped from Ohio State. That's a very good defensive back class. There's no doubt about it. I like that defensive back class. There's a couple things about it, though. Notre Dame, to me, is deeper, 6-4. That matters. I think Notre Dame's 5 and 6 are really good football players. But when Trey McNutt's a really good football player. He's listed as a 5-star. I don't think he's better than Jaydon Blair. Notre Dame also didn't think he was better than Jaydon Blair. Dorian Brew's a good football player. He did not progress the way that I hoped he would, and I think he might end up being a linebacker because he got big. So I don't know that he's a pure defensive back anyway. And Naeem Offord's a very good football player. They have him as a 5-star. I would not trade him for Dallas Golden or Mark Zachary. They're all in that same level. So I think they can not – I think Trey McNutt's a tad overrated, but meaning I don't think he's a 5-star. I think he's a top 75 guy. You know what I'm saying? He's still a really good football player. I just don't know that he's 5-star, top 25 type of guy. That's just – and I just think Jaydon Blair's better than him. I think Dallas Gold and Mark Zachary at the very least are as good as Naeem Offord. I think that, I think Cre Thomas to me is a very comparable prospect to Dorian Brew. And I think that your top 4 guys are all better than Brandon Finney. So for Oregon, if I'm Oregon, I'm thrilled with their secondary class. Thrilled.
Oh, yeah.
I'm simply saying I just think Notre Dame's is better. And, so that's where I'm at. And Ohio State's got a very good secondary class. Even with losing Offord, they still have a very, very good secondary class as well.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't trade it for Notre Dame's. And that's not homer. I'm just telling you, looking at the film, there's some classes I would trade with Notre Dame's at certain positions. Right? I mean, there's some receiver classes you'd be like, would you trade? I'm like, if I could, yeah, I would trade that. No, with all due respect to the kids that they have. But not the DB class. Not the linebacker class, not the O-line class, not the tight end. I'm good. I'm good with what Notre Dame got. Yeah. I'm not kicker, and that's why I say this is a better class than the rankings are going to show. Because there's a lot of classes you say, and does that mean that there aren't others as good? But I'm not trading something as good for something as good. Why would I do that?
Right.
It's like, I'm just not going to do that. Say, hey, I'm going to trade you for Mike Trout in his prime. Would you trade for him? Well, yeah. Well, no, because I've already got Ken Griffey Jr. in his prime. They're both great players, but why would I need to trade him for him? We both have great players already. Why we don't need to trade? We're in the same ballpark. That's how I look at it.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I mean, it's not bad for a school that has to recruit out of a certain aisle. That's all I'll say.
That's a great way to end the show.
Thank you.
He's shopping down a different aisle. His aisle just happens to have people from Georgia in it and Ohio State in it and USC in it and Texas in it and all that kind of stuff. It's definitely, lo and behold, that same aisle still has kids that want to go to class. Imagine that. Still has kids that are academically oriented. Jeremiah Love is one of the most unique kid. Jeremiah Love draws comics. He's a very unique young man. Jeremiah Loves always existed. The Christian Grays, the Benjamin Morrisons, the Leonard Moores that are elite athletes and elite football players that also care about academics and bettering themselves and doing it and challenging. Those kids were always there. You just had to work to get them. You had to work to find them, and then you had to work to get them. And you had to be good at evaluating. That's what was missing before. And then the whole shopping down a different aisle was just a nice, easy, built-in excuse to not have to put in the work. Marcus Freeman's like, we're going to shop down a different aisle. We're going to shop down the same aisle as Georgia. We're going to shop down. Now, there's some things you can't get off the shelves in that aisle. And so what? But there's plenty in there of like, that's a Notre Dame dude right there.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not just a great kid, great academic, but he's a big-time football player.
Oh, yeah.
Those kids you got to work a little harder for. And that's what this staff has done. And that's why we are here.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but it's a good spot to be in. It is a good spot to be in. Well, that's going to do it for us today here at the Irish Breakdown Podcast Recruiting Edition. Thank you guys for being with us today as we walked through the 2025 signees. A lot of awesome news coming out today, obviously highlighted by Madden Farao with the last second signing.
Huge.
Great news.
Huge.
Great news. But you guys know what to do. Make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast. Be sure to leave us a 5-star review on any platform that you watch this show on. Go to boards.irishbreakdown.com so you can see all of the exclusive content that we have coming out. Brian talked about all the intel pieces that he has coming out. It is creeping up on playoff time I mean, it's almost playoff time. There's going to be a lot of great content that's going to be coming out over the next couple of weeks. So make sure you go to boards.irishbreakdown.com to stay in the now. But until next time, for Brian, for myself, we will see you guys back here next time on the Irish Breakdown